Welcome back to the secret underground lair. So we have our leg blanks that we're going to work on today. For each of these two blanks, we should be able to get 2 legs out of each of them, so that'll give us our 4 legs. These legs are going to be cut on a taper, so they'll taper down in 2 ways, 2 directions, and be tilted when they get mounted to the table at about 7 degrees. But one thing at a time. Let's first cut out the blanks. The legs are going to be 27 inches in length, and I like them to be, so they're 1 7/8 inches wide. That's about right. Yeah, this one's a little bit thicker, so we're gonna trim them down just a little bit. Make them 1 7/8 at the top and 1 inch at the bottom. So, the first thing actually that I'm going to do with this piece is trim off this uneven edge here. So with this cut, I'm looking to just touch the edge of this and give a nice clean edge the whole way through. There's our nice clean edge. That's good reference surface now. And that reference edge is away from all of this nastiness down here, so even better. Now the piece is not wide enough to do 2 leg blanks side by side. Actually, I take that back. This actually is wide enough to get 2 leg blanks side by side. I can do that. Well, happy days. That makes it a lot easier. Let's just do it. This one's a little closer tolerance. Might not be able to do it on this guy, but I can certainly do it on this one. So I'm just going to do that. It just makes life a lot easier. I'm just going to set this to be 2 inches. That's just slightly bigger than what we want for the final cut, but we'll get the final cut when we go to do the taper. A slight miscalculation there, but we should be okay with this piece. So this particular piece, even though it has this bit of nastiness here, what will wind up happening is we're going to be cutting on an angle. So imagine this. I'm going to be cutting an angle down like this, so we're going to be coming down to 1 inch wide at this end. So this is the piece that remains, what you can see. And similarly, we're going to be coming down at an angle here, so that that's the piece that remains, and we get rid of all of this nastiness. So that this will just disappear. Okay, just going to take a little bit off there. Alright, we have 4 blanks ready to go. And I'm going to cut these to slightly longer than our ultimate length. There's plenty of room on it too, so in fact I'm going to start by squaring off this end, because I'd like to get rid of most of this if I can. Mind you, that would come out in a taper, but we'll just start here. So I just rough cut the leg blanks to length, or actually I cut them just a little bit short of 28 inches. In the end they're going to be 27 inches long on a little bit of an angle, which winds up making them probably about 27 and a quarter, 27 and a half, somewhere in there. But they're at a length now where I can cut the taper on them. And to do that taper, I do have my little leg tapering jig here. So we'll just bring this up onto the table and start cutting some tapers. Just give me a minute, I'll come back when it's all set up. Alright, I've got the leg tapering jig set up now. I had to swap out this bolt. It wasn't quite long enough for this thickness of leg. So got that set. The jig is clamps the leg blank down to a jig, down to this board here, which I can then set up against the fence. And as I run it through, it's going to cut this off at the taper that I want. What I then do is take the board out, rotate it 90 degrees, clamp it down again, and I cut another taper off the other side. So that way I have a flat edge up against my guide on this side. So you can see I've got a little guide block here. So I always have a straight edge up against there. It does mean though that when I'm putting this on the jig, I do want to pay attention to the sides that I'm trying to cut off. So example, I have a waning edge here. This first pass is going to get rid of the waning edge, and then flipping it over, I'll get rid of a bit of a crack that exists on the other side. So yeah, a little bit of thought goes into setting this up. But now that we're set, we're ready to make this cut. I do have a fair bit of blade exposed, so it is a little, got to be careful with that. But should be good to go. So that's our first taper. I can take this out, rotate 90 degrees, set them back down. And when I clamp them in, I'm going to swap out this block here. That's good for the full height, but now that I'm down a bit, I don't need quite that much. And there's a tapered leg. Now I do have a bit of a crack right here, but that crack is only going up this portion of the leg. So that's not a structural defect. I can fill that in and be okay. Quite okay with that. Some good coloring on that leg too. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the other 4 legs. I'll put you on time lapse for that. But we'll get 4 more tapered. We have 4 tapered legs. So what I will do now is I'm going to mark on these legs which sides are the flat sides and which sides are the tapered sides. So I'll put an F to indicate a flat side, and this becomes important when I go to cut the bevel, because I want imagine the table sitting here upside down. When the leg sits on there, it'll be at a bit of an angle, and I want the taper of the inside edge, I want that to be the tapered edge, and the inside of of the leg. So we got, you know, if this is an end of the table, I got 2 legs sitting like this. I want to make sure that this is the inside taper as well. So the inside of the leg has the taper, the outsides of the legs are the straight edges. So it's important that I know where they are. And being, sometimes it's easy to tell. For example, here, on this edge, it's easy to tell because you can see where the 2 pieces are joined, what the taper edge is. But on this side, you know, it's hard to tell which side is the tapered edge and which side is the straight edge. So I do want to make sure I get that marked. All right, I have the legs now identified. I spend a lot of time doing this, kind of figuring out where the how the legs are going to be oriented on the table and where I want to cut that angle off. And I've labeled every leg. You know, for example, in this one, it's now labeled inside back right. So that's the inside back right leg. Here's the inside front right. So the the legs, of course, they need to be oriented such that the flat side is on the table and the other flat side is against the miter. That way I'm ensuring that the taper is going to be right compared to the taper that this angle that I'm putting on at the top, this 7-degree angle. Trust me when you say I've learned this the hard way. Okay, so I have, what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to cut off the top of every leg at the appropriate angle, and then I'm going to set a stop and cut the bottom of the legs. So, and I have to do 2 of them at this angle, you know, with the miter oriented, you know, you can see the miter is oriented this way. And then I'm going to, when I do the legs, I have to switch the miter around so that it's oriented this way. So I have these 2 legs get cut like this, these 2 legs get cut like this. So I do need to reposition. I'm sure there's a way to do this a little more efficiently, but I found a way that is systematic for me, and it's something I can, with a little bit of careful thinking and planning, I can do repeatedly. So, yeah, let me just get these things cut off, and then we'll worry about the bottom part of the leg. All right, I've got the top cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure with a tape measure 27 inches down to here, and then we'll cut that off. I'll just make a mark and cut at the mark. The fine tuning can happen once the table is assembled, and usually needs to happen once the table is assembled, just to counter for any variations in the wood that happens during the build. So, although I can get them really, really close on this cut, I can't get them perfect, but I can get it reasonably close. So I put these guys down like this, and I'm going to measure from this inside edge, the kind of the, I call it the proud edge, down to here, and then we can make that cut. Okay, again, ensuring that I have the flat side, which I've marked with an F, on the table, and this flat side up against the miter. I'm now going to get a 7-degree cut absolutely parallel to this one. Have our 4 tapered legs what I'm going to do now is go over to the work table and use the belt sander just to kind of clean up the sides a little bit. One of the challenges that I faced last time I did this is I sanded off all my markings. So what I'll be doing is I'll be putting markings on the ends of the legs just so that there's no mistake. I don't lose anything. Just a little tip. Beware when you're ready to sand off all your markings. So I'll come back when I'm all set up over there on the work table. Okay, here on the work table, I'm just going to use the belt sander with 80 grit just to get rid of the saw marks. So a quick run up each side of these 4 legs, and then we'll switch over and start sanding them down with some finer paper, getting up to 220. Put you on time lapse for this operation, and I'm going to be wearing some dust protection for this. Even a little bit of sanding with 80 grit makes an amazing difference to the beauty of that wood. Like that just, you start with a piece that you think, well, man, this is a real compromise in wood quality, but after sanding it down, you just think, man, that's some beautiful stuff. And just take a look at the coloration on that leg. That's going to be really nice. It's going to make a very interesting piece. Okay, I'm going to finish up the sanding on these legs by hand. Again, my little orbital sander is on the Fritz. So I haven't replaced it yet. That's got to happen pretty soon. But I'll just finish sanding these guys up by hand. And I'm going to also just take off the very sharp edge that I have on these pieces now. Again, just with some sandpaper. And then I'll come back when that's done and we can start working on the leg mounts. So I now have our legs sanded to 120, but I encountered a splinter on this piece, so I have him glued up. Another little void in here that I glued together and I got clamped, and a little bit of filler on a couple blemishes that I wanted to reduce. So with, just going to leave those to dry for a minute and go in, have a bite of lunch. All right, so our legs have been sanded by hand right up to 220, so they're nice and smooth. All the filler that I put on and the little splint, a little blemish that I had, that's all been corrected and looking good. So our next step is going to be creating the base onto which these legs will be mounted. So imagine the legs are sitting on the table like that. What we'll have, of course, this is not the piece, but it'll be a piece like this. The legs are going to sit on top of it like that, about halfway. So the leg will be flush with the bottom of the table. This little piece will be embedded within the leg and about halfway width across the leg. So we'll put a screw from the underside of this base into the leg, and then this base unit itself will be screwed onto the base of the table, or onto the underside of the tabletop. That'll give us our leg mounting. So I'm just going to go find a couple pieces that are of our maple that are going to be suitable for this, and we'll cut that down to size. So I have a piece of wood here that's leftover bit from the top, and I'm going to just cut. I tilted the blade at 7 degrees. I'm going to cut a slice off here. Then I'm going to move the fence in and cut a piece equal to about the width of the leg, and then I'll move it in again and cut one more piece. So we'll get everything we need out of this bit. There's our two anchors, the leg anchors. So I'm going to bring up the tabletop now, kind of get a feel for the width that we want these to be. And then we can start working on getting the legs notched out. We'll also run these over, just give them a quick sand with the belt sander to get rid of the saw marks that are on these pieces. So I've sanded off our leg mounts up to 220, so they're good and smooth and ready to be final cut and fit. I then took our tabletop and I sanded the underside of this up to 180. I may go to 220. But I thought it's probably time to deal with the bark that's on the front of the live edge. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a little bit of tear out of that bark here, and I just want to take care of it. So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to get rid of this bark. And I was looking at sandpaper, a wire brush. I tried using a wire brush on a sample. I wasn't really happy with it. But I do have this paint stripping wheel here, and used, of course. So I thought, well, I'd give that a try, and I used this little sample, and it seems to work very well. So it does get rid of the bark, and it doesn't mar the wood beneath it. So I just got rid of most of the bark off that, and the rest of that would come off with light sanding. So I'm going to attempt to use this little wheel now across this entire face. Let's just see how that works. Okay, I've got the top now clamped down. Got a couple little blocks in here to protect the surface so I don't damage it. And let's just see how we do. The question is, am I in the wood or am I just on the bark? And I think I'm probably in the wood here. And this is a cut that I'm going to have to deal with. I was hoping it might just be bark, but I think I have a little bit of work to do there. So anyway, I'll just carry on. Move the camera around though so I get a better angle on that from a working point of view. Okay, some good news, I believe. So that little split that I had down here was in fact a bark split. So there is a fair amount of bark still on this edge that this wheel is cutting into. So I'm pleased with that, and that's going to leave us a live edge that is going to be quite pretty. But I'm going to switch out to an electric drill rather than use my battery operated drill. It'll work a lot faster. All right, cut the electric drill now. Pretty old school. It's been a long time since I've used this tool. And putting on some filter air protection. And I have a fan going now to my dust extractor or dust collector, just to kind of help filter the air a little bit. So back onto time lapse, and we'll continue on with the removal of this bark. So that's all removed now. I'm just going to run over that with some 80 grit. Actually, probably go 120 grit, and then just kind of work up a little bit, see what we can do with that edge. Okay, off camera I sanded that with, I went back to 80 grit, then 180 and 220. So I'm happy with the result that we have there. I think that's going to look okay. It's a little bit darker in some areas than I wanted, but I can leave that. I'm okay with that. This is live edge after all. And there is so much color variation in this wood. It just adds to the interest. So I did a little bit of 220 sanding on this surface. I have to do a little bit more there. I'm going to just sand off the back edge. And then I'm ready to cut this to the appropriate length and sand the ends. Then we can mount our leg stands, or start worrying about the leg stands. So let me do a little bit more sanding. I'll do that off camera and come back when we're ready to do the legs. All right, the time has come to actually cut this to length. And I want to cut it to length so that I have a better understanding of where I want the legs to be. So this is kind of the next step. I have put tape around the whole piece here just to try and help avoid tear out. I'm using my circular saw, so the blade is going to be going into the wood. Shouldn't have any tear out on the good side, but I put tape there anyway. On the top side rather, not the good side, top side. And I put tape on the bottom side here just to help minimize tear out. But anyway, we'll cut her off, see how it does. Slow and steady as she goes. Seems to have done the trick. Let's see what we get. Just a little minimal amount of tear out. That's not too bad actually. And on that side, nothing. So nothing to speak of. So a little bit of sanding. And that cut's going to look real good. Bring over for a closer look at that edge. So as you can see here, there's just minimal tear out, hardly anything to speak of. You're in really close here too, so that's good. I like it. All right, I'll do the other end, and then we can get the legs on. All right, got you in a view that you haven't had before, but just want to show you what I think about when I go to position the legs. So obviously I want the legs, to be down here, so 2 legs sitting like so. And as you can see, they slope out quite a bit. So they're tilting out in this direction. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. Okay, that's not bad. So you can see the legs slope out, and what I want to make sure of is that the top of this leg is 1 inch from the edge of the table, and I want this outside edge of the leg to be 1 inch from the edge of the table. So it just kind of, somehow the geometry, when you look at the table, it just makes a little sense, and it just looks right, as opposed to having the leg too far out and it extends beyond the table, or too far in and it just looks a little weird. So I found over time that getting that foot of the leg an inch away from the edge of the table, or at least the same distance as the face of the leg from the front edge or the back edge of the table. Now in this case, since it's a live edge table and the width of the table here is going to be slightly different than the width of the table at the far end, I need to work everything off the back edge. So that's where I'm going to be starting from. Now, how do I know how far this is? Well, here's a simple way for me to tell. So if I put the leg there on the table and I get this piece flush with the edge of the table here, so just have this flush with the edge. And then I have this corner of the leg even or flush with the back of that. Now I know that this is the distance away, or distance that the leg moves. All right, so that is 5 inches. So if the leg, when I put it here, this is going to be 5 inches farther away, actually 5 inches from the front edge to this edge. So I'm going, the distance from here to here, when standing vertically, is 5 inches. Which means I want this front edge of this leg to be 6 inches from the end of the table. I hope that makes sense. Okay, 6 inches, that's the mark that I was after. Now that I have it, what I want to do next on these legs is to cut out. So I'm going to cut out a slot here so that I can sit over top of this. So here is my leg holding jig. I got this with my Sears Craftsman table saw many years ago. It's actually for holding up panels, but it works really well for this task as well. The idea that I've got here, of course, now is I've got the flat edge of the leg up against this piece so that it runs vertically. This then will be the interior part of the leg. And I have set this face back 7/8 of an inch so that as it slides forward, we're going to be cutting a slot. Just, you can see that the blade is up against a pencil mark there. And I have set the blade to be the height of our stock here. So this is going to sit on top of that. So I'm going to make one cut through, all the way through, and then I could do a series of cuts, to kind of like a dado, as it were. But instead, I'm just going to make one cut, then I'm going to flip the piece over so that it sits flat on the saw. and we'll make the other cut. Now I have to make a little bit of an adjustment for that because as this sits flat on the saw, it's on the taper. So I'll show you what I do to compensate for that. But I'm going to make a series of 4 cuts on each of the legs to get this piece, get that one cut. So now I want to cut out illustration. So now I want to cut out this portion, cut that out of our piece, and to do that I'm going to, if I set it down here flat on the saw, I'm at the wrong angle. So by taking the piece that we cut out here, I now have this set back up flat. And when I push this through, again, I'm gonna have to push it through at 7 degrees and make sure I get the fence set up so that I'm at the right distance away. And with one cut there, we'll get this little block cut out. All right, I have the saw set up. So I've got my leg on a little taper here, so he's at the right angle. I have the fence set the width of our mounting leg mount block, and a little 1/4 inch spacer there so that when this piece goes through, I'm not going to have any binding in the blade. Let's give it a cut. Should also note that 2 of the legs will be cut this way, and then I'm going to have to flip the thing around and do 2 the other way. So with those pieces now cut, the only piece remaining to do is cut this to length. So our leg is going to sit on here like this. One leg will sit that way. The other leg will sit at the other end like that. So they're embedded, and what this lets me do because I have a good amount of purchase there, I can get a good glue joint in there to start with. But for strength, what I could do is put a screw through here at an angle so a screw will come through at an angle like that. I'll zoom in on that so you can see a little better. Draw a line. So the screw will come in like that. This will be a countersunk, or actually a pocket screw, so it's going to have a shoulder on it, but it'll be countersunk in there, and it's a screw that will never be seen. And then this piece is going to be held on to the bottom of the table by another shouldered screw, like a pocket screw. So I'll have a hole about here and a hole, halfway or right beside the leg, and that'll get screwed into the bottom of the table. So this leg assembly will be a solid construction, one-piece construction in the end. That'll be a single piece. that can get mounted onto the table. So yeah, that's where we are. I'm pleased to get the legs cut and ready for installation. So that'll be our next video. We'll call that one for today. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. See you on the next video.